Hey guys, it's Kat, and today I'm going to be talking about how to successfully co-parent. And we are featuring the good old cat ears. Are these on right? Because I wanted my hair out of my face, because I look like a lion right now. So I think the first and probably most important thing is to have open communication, whether that's in text, whether that's in person, whether that's video chatting or phone calls, whatever. You need to thoroughly communicate and try to make things as civil as possible and be considerate of one another. There's a lot that goes into being considerate, which we'll get into in a minute, but I know one of the struggles me and my daughter's father have are that sometimes we just don't even think about the other person when the actions that we're doing and like how it affects them. It's like we kind of just are like, since we're not together, we can be selfish. But in general, that's not really the right thing to do. The right thing to do is try to actually make things work and do what's best for your kid. Because really, that's all this is about. It's about making the best life for your kid. Because there's no reason a kid can't have a good life even with their parents split up. Sometimes it can even be better. I know, like, my mom had her one ex-husband. His family was so good to me, and that was so important. So having multiple families is actually really nice, too. Two, sometimes this is decided by the court. A lot of this can be decided by, like, in legal stuff, but we have no part of that, at least right now. But to have a shareable schedule. Like, I know what he's got going on, and he knows what I got going on all the time. We have a general set schedule of who has our daughter when, but we don't always stick to it. We're completely fine with like working together on it. Like sometimes one of us works when the other's supposed to have her. The main time he can't have her is when he's working, so it's pretty easy for me to work with his schedule. He works thirds and I don't work thirds. The only thing is when our schedules overlap is the main time when we need a babysitter. The third thing is keeping things structured and having a general routine. I have struggled for so long to have a routine and like a general schedule for our daughter because I have a contingent position, so I work all shifts. But we figured out, finally, we've gotten her on a schedule, a general schedule, and it's actually helped a lot with her sleeping. She is 8.5 months old and just now starting to sleep better. So the schedule is a huge thing. Now, I'm not saying I have to be in bed at this point every single night because, you know, days are different, things are different, things are going to mess up your schedule, but that's the general idea of it. There's certain things that I want to have as like a routine for her. Like, for one thing, she gets lotion every night. And then I prefer for us to pray with her, despite the fact that she actually is very distracting when trying to. And she doesn't really completely understand it. It creates that routine of, oh, hey, we need to pray before we go to bed, when we wake up, before meals, and in general, there's more than that. There's more that goes into it than that. But she's a baby and she doesn't fully understand if I try to explain it to her right now. I do try though, because, you know, she's like a little sponge absorbing everything right now. So that's why it's also so important to create good habits. And there's a few things I'm picky about, like I do not ever want her leaving the house in pajamas because there's no reason for it. When they're a newborn and like a tiny baby, that's a little bit different. But now that she's older and now she's crawling, which is a new thing too, it's just, you got to create a general routine or else it's going to be so much harder. Like I was talking to the dermatologist because she goes to a bunch of specialists, and she said, you know, people that wait till their kids are older to put lotion on them every night, a toddler's not going to want to cooperate. But if you start that from day one, they'll know what's going to happen for their general night routine. Plus, like triggers, hey, it's bedtime. And they associate the different things with bedtime or waking up or whatever. I try to make sure she goes to church every Sunday, despite if I work that Sunday. This is more for as they get older. So really all these apply, even if like your kid's way older. So the fourth one is rules and discipline. And this is where, I'll get into it in a minute, but where relationships, like with another person, can mess things up. Because you have to keep things consistent across the board. Like, she can't be allowed to watch TV all day at my house and then not at his, or play video games, or, whatever it is. You got to keep the rules consistent, because I knew I could get away with certain things at different parents' houses. I wasn't really a kid that cared, though, because I pretty much just, did what I was supposed to. My only problem was that I had an attitude. So, I kept my grades up. I didn't ever have a problem. I was a pretty good kid. My parents were blessed. But the point is, you just got to keep things consistent. I know if my mom wouldn't give me something, I'd ask my grandparents. And this was more when I was really little. Not as much so as I got older, because I didn't really understand, money doesn't grow on trees, and, to actually appreciate what you have. My family can be very materialistic, and so I got a mindset of that, and I actually can make a video on how I fixed being so materialistic and kind of a hoarder. Not really a hoarder, I just liked a lot of stuff. I was organized, and I had a lot of stuff, and we had the space for it. It wasn't like I had stuff stacked up. I just took up 3 rooms. It's fine. But I fixed that through minimalism. I'm not an extreme minimalist or anything, but I do like to keep some of the habits of a minimalist lifestyle. I know the bad habits I've had, and I just don't want her to gain those. I want to try to I want to give her the best life that I can and help her be the best her she can be. Also, with the rules and discipline, I don't even know if I said that's the 4th one is the rules and discipline. You got to keep it consistent. You got to make sure you both agree on the rules, and it's got to be age appropriate, of course. If she gets grounded at one house but not the other, you got to just keep it consistent across the board. That includes if somebody else comes into the picture, they can't let them get away with stuff, because I know that can be really hard. I was really difficult on my mom's boyfriends. Part of it was because, I don't want this to sound bad. There was just a lot of them, and I just never really liked them, because I was just sick of, new people coming into our lives and taking attention away from me, because I was an only child. And I just had my mom for the most part. My grandparents lived far away, so they could only come up so much and visit. So that was kind of I would end up getting away with stuff with them, or if they would follow the rules and stuff when it comes to me, or when they would get involved in fights. There's just a lot. That's a really fine line you have to be careful with, because I just know that's going to be hard. Both of us are single, so we don't really have to worry about that at the moment. But when you're getting in a relationship with someone and you're a parent, that person is coming in, and even if you're not getting married that day, they still have to kind of have that parenting role, because you got to keep it consistent. Obviously, there's certain things you got to be really careful with it, because, they can't just come in and start disciplining your kid. Maybe they can. Maybe that works for your family, but I could not see that being an option for us, and I wouldn't really want that. I don't know that I'd be comfortable with that. I know my mom had boyfriends that would try to tell her how to parent, and she was not okay with, especially when they already weren't parents. It's but whatever. I'm going off on a tangent. The next thing is boundaries as far as relationships, you and that other co-parent. So for us, we had been on and off for a really long time, and finally we were just this is not healthy for any of us. This is not healthy for our daughter. We're done. So we had to set a lot of boundaries, because not only was he at one point my boyfriend, but also my fiance, and also my best friend. So you have to keep it as a just friends basis, and obviously we've been intimate and all that. So there's a lot of boundaries you got to set to keep yourselves from falling back into that habit, which is one thing I know we struggle with too. So the next thing is what I've already kind of touched on: outside relationships, a plan for it. That's not just relationships that me getting another boyfriend or him getting a girlfriend or whatever. It's also friendships you have and people that come around her. You have to be mindful of how they may affect her. Say I have a certain type of person I wouldn't want in her life, someone that has they're into some bad stuff. I obviously wouldn't want them around her. So obviously we got to avoid being in relationships and friendships that bring that in, because anybody you bring into this kid's life, your kid's going to absorb everything when it comes to them. So you have to be very mindful of the people you surround yourself with, that your kid gets surrounded with as well. I think it's a good respect thing to make sure that whoever you're bringing around, the other parent is okay with. Obviously, that kind of depends on how good you guys can co-parent, or how how well the communication is. So for an example, for us, we don't communicate always very well. And there's, I think, a lot of like built up anger, obviously, from the fact that we were together and it didn't work out. There's certain things, like when he's looking at a place to get to live, or if I were to go look at a place, we ask each other to come look at it too, to make sure we're okay with our daughter living in that space. People that come into our lives, or places we take her, things we do, we both make sure we are okay with that decision. Like, I've thought about putting her in daycare because I think it'd be a good option, but you know, we got to talk about that. And I know some parents will just make decisions without even talking to the other, and I think that that can cause a lot of problems. So that's something that I think works for us, is being mindful and respectful of the other and their thoughts on everything, and just being considerate. I'm kind of being super repetitive, and obviously this isn't like a copy and paste thing. You're gonna have to flip some of this advice to work for your situation, but the general main key points of it, like the open communication, having a shareable schedule, like I think those things are pretty like across the board things you gotta do. You just gotta fit it for your situation and circumstances. My therapist who helped us create this, so I'm not gonna take the credit for this completely, but he helped us create this list. And the last one is active friends and family plan. So like there's certain things I'm not okay with. Like I don't want people to smoke around her. I don't want her around people that are drinking. She's a baby. She doesn't need to be around that. I also don't like, this one's kind of a tough one. So a lot of grandparents will spoil the kid and let them do things they're not typically supposed to, which I guess is kind of like in the definition of being a grandparent. But the problem is that can create a lot of bad habits. And especially when you're trying to, like when they're a baby, you really need to kind of keep it relatively strict, because if not, it's going to mess up their schedule and it's going to make it so much harder on the kid. And then as things go on and the kid gets older, you have to be careful, because there's certain things, like if you go against the parents' wishes with things, like I've saw this example on Facebook where the mom said no about some sort of sugary something or another, and then the family gave it to the kid anyways, but I think it was a grandparent. That's kind of a tough one, because like it probably depends on how much they come to your house and how okay the parent is with that. Like say we don't let her drink pop at our house, but she can at her grandparents', that's fine. There's certain things, but you need to make sure that like the grandparent communicates with you and like asks you first. I think that if my mom always would, because my daughter has a lot of allergy issues, so she'd be too scared to give her something. I'm pretty sure my dad would too, but that's a little bit different because he has help with it. There's just some things you gotta make sure are really consistent. Communication is the absolute key to any relationship, and especially with parenting. You gotta keep in mind how what you're doing is going to affect the kid. You got to keep their best interest in mind above yours. Now, obviously, you need to make sure you are healthy and good, so that way you can be a good parent for your kid. But there's a line to draw with being a good parent and being selfish, and there's a line to draw with being too focused on your kid and not giving yourself enough like care. Like when you slack on hygiene and stuff. I had been slacking on like my fitness, started to feel like really gross and get sick a lot because of it, and like my health in general. So I made sure I picked that back up. Originally I was like slacking on my like skincare and stuff like that, things that made me feel good and are good for me. Obviously there's a line to draw with it. If your whole life is surrounded by like working out and everything and you pay no mind to your kid, that's a problem. But you know, there's also people who do it for a living, and that's a little different. Just remember when watching this that this is not a copy and paste thing. It's just things that might be able to help and have helped with us. We are nowhere near good at co-parenting. It is a work in progress. It is quite difficult. We fight quite a bit, but we're finally, I think, getting better about it, because, you know, that's part of the problem with the relationship. We would fight in front of her, and you can see it affecting her. Instead of fighting in front of her, one, take it into a different area and make sure she can't hear you or anything, and make sure you calm down before you come back and she can't sense the tension. And honestly, there's no reason to fight. It's better to just discuss things, and I'm one to discuss everything. A lot of the times it can turn into a fight just by not watching your tone and how you're coming off to each other. And then if someone does come off in a like not so good way, tell them instead of like fighting back about it. Like there's no reason to make it a big fight over nothing. Like the one day we got into an actual fight over how to put her onesie on. And honestly, that's probably majority of our fights are like stupid things that could have just been solved by communicating better. Hence the problem with the relationship too. You just got to be willing to make it work. I know that not every situation is like this, but I'm talking about a typical co-parenting situation where both parties want to be involved, both parents want to be completely involved, which I know is probably not even as, I don't know how common that is. I've heard of a lot of situations, most of the time I feel like one parent is way more involved than the other. I try to just be realistic, but I hope it doesn't come off as like complaining too much. It's just I want to be realistic in how hard it can be, because I didn't know any of this until I became a parent. So I want to be realistic, but I also talk about the good too. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Anyways, bye!